All right, get your notes out then, please. Today we're going to be doing what's called solving quadratic equations. All right, so let's start off here. We're going to say that wherever the graph of a function intersects the x-axis, the function of x is equal to 0. Wherever the graph of a function intersects the x-axis, the function of x is equal to 0. A value for which let's say a value of x for which f of x is 0 is called a 0 of the function. All right, wherever the graph of a function intersects the x-axis, the function of x is equal to 0. A value of x for which f of x is equal to 0 is called a 0 of the function. So what we're talking about here is, parabolas. These quadratics are parabolas. So if you had your x and your f of x axis, and then you were to graph a parabola, and let's say we graphed a parabola and it looks something like this. All right, in this case, this parabola hits the x-axis right here and right here at two different points. These 2 points, all right, both of these points have a y value of 0 or a f of x value of 0. All right, so these points here and here, these are called zeros of the function. That point and that point, where the function of x equals 0 or where y equals 0, those are called zeros of the function. And what you're going to be doing today is you're going to be solving functions, or you're going to be solving quadratic equations by factoring. So it's an extension of what you did yesterday. So here's what's going to happen today. You're going to be solving a quadratic equation by factoring. And here's the type of question that you might get. You're going to be asked, what are the solutions of the quadratic? X squared minus 5x plus 6 equals 0. Now, by this equation being set to 0, you're making the equation equal to the f of x, or the function equal to 0. So you're going to find the x values, or you're going to find the 2 points where the function hits the x-axis. All right? And today you're going to be doing it by factoring. So what you're going to do is you're going to factor x squared minus 5x plus 6. So if you take your x squared minus 5x plus 6 is equal to 0, you're going to factor it into 2 binomials that equals 0. So since our a is equal to 1, or positive 1, we've got an x here and an x here. And can anybody give me the numbers that add up to 6, or I'm sorry, multiply to 6, but add to 5? 3 and 2, or 2 and 3? Good. So if we do a 2 and a 3, a 2 and a 3. All right, we need a 2 times 3 to equal positive 6, and we need a 2 plus 3 to equal negative 5. So what do the signs have to be in both of those? What do the signs have to be in both of those? Negatives. Good. All right, so you have factored this quadratic, and you've set it equal to 0. Now, since if either of these factors were a 0, then x minus 2 times 0 would equal 0, and 0 times x minus 3 would equal 0. So what we do now is we break this thing apart, and we make x minus 2 equal to 0, and we make x minus 3 equal to 0. And then we solve for x. All right, so we would add 2 to each side, and x would equal positive 2. And then we would add 3 to each side, and x would equal 3. So the solutions of the equation x squared minus 5x plus 6 are x equals 2 or x equals 3. Those are your solutions. All right, that parabola would hit the x-axis at 2 and at 3. That makes sense to everybody? Now what you will see, same type of question. But your equation in this form, x squared minus 7x equal to negative 12. Now this quadratic isn't set equal to 0. So what we have to do is manipulate it until it is equal to 0. So in order to get a 0 on the right-hand side of this equation, we could add 12 to each side. And on the left side, make sure you don't add your 12 to your 7x. The 12 doesn't have an x with it. So we get x squared minus 7x plus 12 equal to 0. And then we factor that. All right. Factors of 12 that add up to 7. Factors of 12 that add to 7. Anybody? 3 and 4. Same case as the problem we just did. They have to multiply to a positive, but they have to add to a negative. So what do both the signs need to be? That's a minus 3 and a minus 4. So then you take each of your factors and you set them equal to 0. So we make x minus 3 equal to 0 and x minus 4 equal to 0. Solve them both. So x can be equal to 3 and x can also be equal to 4. So there's your two solutions. X equals 3 or x is equal to 4. Any questions on either of those? All right, so let's try this. Three x squared minus x equal to 2. All right, again, in this case, this quadratic is not set equal to 0. So we're going to manipulate it. We're going to subtract 2 from each side. So we get 3x squared minus x minus 2 equal to 0. And now we talked about yesterday when this leading coefficient is not a 1 that we're going to draw a table. All right, and the two factors of 3x squared, fortunately, there's only two factors of 3x squared. That's 3x and x. All right, and our 3x times our x is our 3x squared. Now we need a couple of values that are going to multiply to a 2. So that's either a 1 here and a 2 here, or a 2 and a 1. 1 and 2 or 2 and 1. If I put a 2 here and a 1 here, what's going to be in this box? Good, a 6. And what will be in this box? A 1x, right? And with a 1x and a 6x, can you get to a negative x? No, that doesn't work, does it? So we need to try the Let's try the 1 up here and the 2 here. So now our 3x times the 1x, or 3x times 1 is 3x. Our x times the 2 is 2x. And our 2 times the 1 is the 2. This 2 needs to be negative. And this x value, if this x value needs to be negative, then the larger of these two x's needs to be negative. So right here needs to be a negative. This 3x needs to be negative. So in order for that 3x to be negative, this 1 needs to be negative. All right, so that gives us 3x times negative 1, negative 3x. And it gives us 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So that works. All right, so our factors for this equation are 3x plus 2 times x minus 1 is equal to 0. So now you set each factor equal to 0. So 3x plus 2 is equal to 0, and x minus 1 is also equal to 0. You solve them both. So on this left-hand side, you got to subtract 2 from each side. The 3x is equal to negative 2, and then divide both sides by 3. So you've got an x that's equal to negative 2/3. And this equation or factor on the right, you could add 1 to each side. So your x is going to be equal to positive 1. So the two places where this parabola will hit the x-axis, negative 2/3 or positive 1. Those are your two solutions. Any questions on that? All right, let me show you one more example. Let's do 25b squared equals 20b. 25b squared equals 20b. In a case like this, your same first step is to set the equation equal to 0. So if we subtract 20b from each side, on the left-hand side, we get 25b squared minus 20b is equal to 0. So now it's not a trinomial, it's a binomial. And you can factor this by pulling out the greatest common factor. So the greatest common factor of 25 and 20 is 5. And the greatest factor of b squared and b is b. So if you pull out a 5b, and you take 25b squared and you divide it by 5b, you get a 5b. And 20b minus 5b is 4. And all of that's still equal to 0. So 5b and 5b minus 4 are your two factors. And you set each of those equal to 0. So you set 5b equal to 0. And 5b minus 4 equal to 0. So on the left, you can divide both sides by 5. And b would be equal to 0. And on the right, you can add 4 to each side. So 5b would equal 4, and then divide both sides by 5. And your b would be equal to 4/5. So this graph would hit the x-axis at 0 and 4/5. All right, are there any questions on either of those types of problems? All right, your assignment for today then. Make sure it's on a clean sheet of paper. It's going in the basket when the bell rings. If you're at home, you're going to need to send me a picture of it. All of it. So we got page 229, 1 through 3, and then 9 through 17. Show all your work. All right, put it in the basket when the bell rings. If you're a Zoom student, take a picture of it when it's 100% complete and email it to me. Since I've given you enough time, I should get that email before the end of the period today. Anybody have any questions? Yeah. Page 229. Yeah, it does. Look like down the right side, about 2/3 of the way down. You're welcome.